Hello, and welcome to Act 2, Scene 2 from Othello. It's what, 10 lines? Woohoo! We're done with Act 2, Scene 2. Uh, right? Essentially, what is the proclamation? The herald proclaims, that everybody should celebrate the victory and the victory, the battle, right, as a country, and they should also celebrate Othello's marriage, right? They should, right, honor, God bless the island of Cyprus, right? Bless the Isle of Cyprus and our noble General Othello. Okay, so we see he's getting the recognition, well deserved, right? Remember when Duncan gives Macbeth and Banquo the well deserved recognition, right? Uh, Again, the success, does their success uh, have a negative effect, right? Does Macbeth get upset when he sees the recognition given to others, specifically uh, Duncan's son Malcolm, right? Does Iago get more and more upset the more Othello gets recognition and Cassio, gets recognition? I think so. And again, this all kind of has recognition, these things, right? Ethos, your reputation, right? And that's what we're going to talk about in this Act Two, Scene Three. We have numerous quotes related to reputation, and I think that's just a synonym for ethos. So, what happens? The plan is moving forward, right, to stage the fight, um, and essentially try to get Cassio to mess up so that Iago can get him fired and take his job. And it works. What's really interesting is when Othello shows up, notice how Iago uses this is one of the first times we see his reverse psychology. And reverse psychology plays a huge role in the play. Obviously, right, he really wants to tell Othello what happened. He came up with this whole plan, but the more Othello questions him, the more he's like, no, no, I don't want to speak bad about Cassio. Um, we have this whole speech starting at line 207, Act 2, Scene 3, 207. Iago says, touch me not so near. I had rather have this tongue cut from my mouth than it should do offense to Michael Cassio. Yet I persuade myself to speak the truth shall nothing wrong him. I don't want to talk bad about him, right? And then when he says, this is what he did, right? He ends it by kind of further trying to put in a good word for Cassio. He says, line 228, but men are men, the best sometimes forget, right? Nobody's perfect. Um, and essentially, Othello says, all right, Cassio, you're done. Iago, you're now my lieutenant. So the plan works. But notice how Iago, rather than saying, yeah, I can't wait to tell you and get rid of him, he's like, no, no, no. I don't want to speak bad, and I don't know. I don't know what I'm supposed. Right? Again, letting Othello make the decision, because when people tell somebody, that's what reverse psychology is. A lot of times, you tell someone to do the opposite of what you want or the opposite of how you feel, because a lot of times there's that irony, right? If you tell someone to do something, a lot of times they'll do the opposite. Why? I don't know. Maybe it's people don't like being told what to do. Maybe when you tell someone what to do, is that not an act of hubris? I don't know. There's different ways to think about it, but reverse psychology is a psychological concept. And if you wanted to examine Iago's Schadenfreude and his use of reverse psychology for manipulative purposes in this play as a character psychological analysis, just as Act 2, Scene 1 would be ripe for such analysis, so is Act 2, Scene 3. Um, there's a very interesting conversation with him and Cassio, and afterwards, everybody leaves, and he's chatting with Cassio, and we have a really important quote, line 250. Cassio says, reputation, reputation, reputation. Oh, I have lost my reputation. I have lost the immortal part of myself, and what remains is bestial. My reputation, Iago, my reputation. Notice how many times he says reputation, lines 250 to 254, right? And then Iago replies, he says, As I am an honest man, I thought you had received some bodily wound. There is more sense in that than in reputation. Reputation is an idle and most false imposition, oft got without merit and lost without deserving. Cassio says, my reputation, right? The immortal part of myself. Is that not true? Does your reputation not live on? Your ethos, your credibility, sense of trust? And he says, without it, without my reputation, what remains is bestial or bestial, right? I'm like an animal. I've lost my reputation. And Iago's like, what? Oh, I thought you were sad because you got injured physically, right? He says there's more sense in being upset about a bodily wound than your reputation because reputation is an idle and most false imposition. Appearances versus reality. Your reputation isn't really a true reflection of who you are. Why? Because it is often got without merit. People get titles, get jobs when they don't deserve it, nepotism, and lost without deserving. Things are taken away from you sometimes when you don't deserve to have it taken away, a job, a title. This is Rodrigo. He was promoted to lieutenant according to Iago when he didn't deserve it, and now he's removed from lieutenant because of Iago when he doesn't deserve it. So it's interesting how Iago is almost like telling Cassio, I'm sorry, Cassio, I think I just said Rodrigo, forgive me. He's almost like telling Cassio, right, that what happened to him is okay. Reputation is an idle and most false imposition, oft got without merit. Remember, Cassio was promoted to lieutenant, apparently not deserving, and lost without deserving. And now it's taken away from him, and he doesn't deserve it because it was a setup, right? And remember, Iago used alcohol to manipulate him, much like Lady Macbeth used alcohol to manipulate the guards, much like Claudius's plan for Hamlet involves alcohol, drinking the wine, and then Gertrude drinks the wine by mistake. Um, and when they're talking about it, because remember, Cassio told Iago at the beginning of the scene, "I don't like to drink. Doesn't agree with me." And Iago's like, "Oh, just have one, just have one, just have one." I mean, how often do we see that with peer pressure, with bandwagoning? Everybody's doing it. Just have one. That's all. It'll be fine. Again, we see that we see alcohol being abused and manipulated, and people having problems with it in Shakespeare hundreds of years ago. Right. So again, if you're writing, if you want to look at psychological things, addictions, things of that nature, kind of continue an idea you started in essay three, or apply it to this play. Alcohol plays a role in Macbeth, and alcohol plays a role um, in Othello as well as part of the plot devices, one of the plot devices. So I think that Cassio has a really interesting reply when Iago says, "Is it possible, right? Um, that you killed him, that you used your sword, that you were right at the bottom of line 273, Iago, is it possible that you really did do something?" And Cassio's like, "I don't know, man. I was drunk." And he says, "Oh, that men should put an enemy in their mouths to steal away their brains." Line 275. Is that not what alcohol and drugs do? They take away our critical thinking skills. What is Macbeth and Banquo when they talk about the insane root when they see the witches? Banquo says, "Have we eaten on the insane root that takes the reason prisoner?" Right? When people eat hallucinogens, it takes the reason prisoner because you don't think reasonably when you're on drugs, when you're hallucinating. Same thing when people are drunk. Oh, that men should put an enemy in their mouths to steal away their brains. Is that what alcohol does when people get drunk? It steals away their brains. It makes us make illogical decisions. I say us because I'm a human being. And unfortunately, in my younger and more vulnerable years, to quote the great Gatsby, right, I have made bad decisions. And again, nobody's perfect. I'm not claiming to be, but I think he makes a really interesting point about alcohol and the effects on critical thinking and decision making here. But it plays right into Iago's hand, and we see as we move forward around line 300, specifically 301, Iago tells Cassio, "Confess yourself freely to her, importune her to help you put your put you in your place again. A couple lines earlier, line 298, our general's wife is now the general. Oh, she's the one that you need to appeal to get your job back, right? And it works. And Cassio's like, yeah, you're right. That's a pretty good idea. So he leaves, and let's just look at his Iago's speech at the end of Act 2, Scene 3 with the omniscience, because again, as I said earlier, whenever people call him Honest Iago, it's both true and ironic. It's true because he never lies to himself and he never lies to us through omniscience. It's ironic because he lies to everyone else in the play. So take a look at this soliloquy that starts on line 316. And what's he then that says I play the villain? Question mark. Right? Cassio's left the stage, and now he's just addressing us. But just like those lovable villains, the villain that you love to hate, when they tell us what they're thinking, it kind of makes us privy to their plan. It kind of makes it seem like even though they're horrible to everybody else, they're not horrible to us. Even though they don't like everybody else, even though he derives pleasure from everybody else's pain and he's schadenfreude, the fact that he's honest with us makes him a little bit more endearing. I think the speech is an example of that possible phenomenon of the omniscience of the villain leading to almost like an acceptance and this weird endearing quality to the readers and the viewers and the listeners. And what's he that then says, I'm sorry, what's he then that says I play the villain? When this advice is free, I give and honest, probable to thinking, and indeed the course to win the more again. Right? He's saying it's actually pretty good advice that he should go talk to his wife. Yes, but not if Iago is telling Othello in his other ear that, oh, look, Cassio's talking to your wife. Hey, by the way, do you trust him? Hey, by the way, no, I'm probably overreacting. Again, he uses the reverse psychology. No, don't think about it. Don't think about it. But again, this would be good advice if Iago wasn't manipulating the situation. So it's very paradoxical how Iago rationalizes his behavior to us and to himself. For 'tis most easy the inclining Desdemona to subdue in an honest suit. She's framed as fruitful and the free elements. Right? He's saying everything's playing to my favor. The plot is coming together, and everything's set up for me to take advantage and to manipulate. Right? And again, said, as I've said throughout the semester, when people are going to lie, cheat, and steal, when people are going to be duplicitous, they're not going to tell you in advance, right? And we see that here. How then, all the way down on line 328, how am I then a villain to counsel Cassio to this parallel course directly to his good? Yes, you are counseling him to do something logical, to appeal to Desdemona for his job, but it's not logical if you're manipulating him so that on the other end of the plan, you can make Othello think that him talking to Desdemona is not to try to get his job back, that he's talking to Desdemona because he wants to sleep with her. But don't the good manipulators and liars, right? Don't they kind of believe their own BS in some ways, right? He says, "How then am I the villain? How am I then a villain to counsel Cassio to this parallel course directly to his good?" Now, this is the line I'm interested in. Divinity of hell. When devils will the blackest sins put on, they do suggest at first with heavenly shows, as I do now. For whilst this honest fool plies Desdemona to repair his fortune, and she for him pleads strongly to the more, I'll pour this pestilence into his ear, that she repeals him for her body's lust, and by how much she strives to do him good, she shall undo her credit with the more, so will I turn her virtue into pitch, and out of her own goodness make the net that shall enmesh them all. Figures of speech, the analogies, the omniscience, the schadenfreude, the duplicity, the manipulation, all of it. He confesses, right? For when the devils will the blackest sins put on, they do suggest at first with heavenly shows, as I do now. When people are going to do bad things, they pretend to be good. Right? Remember, Ophelia brings that up in Hamlet. She says, "Don't, good brother," to her brother Laertes, "act like an ungracious pastor," right? Who says, "Oh, be holy and religious," right? When he doesn't practice what he preaches. Claudius acts like he's a good king, like he has Denmark's best interests in mind. Lady Macbeth, right, tells Macbeth, "Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it." Deception, duplicity. We see it here. No one is more deceptive and duplicitous than Iago. Can you imagine him and Lady Macbeth if they got together? Ooh wee, ooh wee. Right. Anyway, so Rodrigo comes in. I'll kind of wrap this up here. It's very short. The end lines 350. Iago responds to him because Rodrigo comes in. He's like, "You've been taking all my money. I just got in a fight. I feel like you're taking advantage of me. What's up?" Right? He confronts him yet again. Iago is able to flip it and manipulate the situation. "Oh, how poor are they that have not patience." That's a great line, by the way. Line 349. Patience, the opposite of being rash, the opposite of getting jealous. Be patient, be logical. How poor are they that have not patience! What wound did ever heal but by degrees? Thou knowest we work by wit and not by witchcraft, and wit depends on dilatory time, right? We work by wit, we work by thinking. Hold on, be patient, set tight with the plan. I'm not cooking up some spell, it's not witchcraft. Just give it time. So he's able to take Rodrigo's anxiety and unease and turn it into almost a sense of confidence, right? He kind of flips it on him. And he says, "Now get out of here. Don't worry, right? Yeah, you got a small hurt, but Cassio's out, and the plan is moving forward." And Rodrigo's like, "Oh, okay, cool." Iago is just constantly able to manipulate him. And lastly, right, omniscience, lines 360 to the end of Act 2, Scene 3. Right, he kind of reviews for us. He says, "Two things are to be done. My wife must move for Cassio to her mistress. I'll set her on, right? Myself, the while to draw the more apart and bring him jump when he may Cassio find soliciting his wife. Aye, that's the way. Dull not device by coldness and delay." What a cool ending line. As horrible as his manipulations and Schadenfreude are, it's just so beautifully poetic the way he says things. In Acts 1 and 2, right, to kind of review here, Othello is, presented as a noble, loyal general, just, rational man, successful in his endeavors. But now, as we begin Act 3, we see his fall from reasoned judgment, from critical thinking, to irrational obsession, irrational jealousy, irrational paranoia. So, stay tuned for more as we move forward into Act 3 of Othello. Thank you for your patience. Call if you have any questions.